Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the quick introduction. The aim today for me is to try to give you an idea how we are, let's say, collecting expression of needs from cities and trying to translate this in standardization work, delivering the tool the cities are expected. So usually when we start approaching cities, we start with this type of issues. We would like to move from the city we have on the top to the one on the bottom. And this is, of course, a very complex challenge. We are in Europe, especially in existing cities. We are not in the same situation as other parts of the world, especially in China, where they could start from scratch and develop several million inhabitant new cities. We are starting with something that exists. So you understand the really complex challenge, but there are also great opportunities to improve the quality of life of the citizens, but also our environmental impact and economical impact also. But of course, moving from the existing cities to the ideal case we have below, will need several months or years for planning the changes. And then many, many years, sometimes a decade, to have the right infrastructures to moving that sense. And then everything will last for decades. So it is extremely important to have a long-term vision and a sustainable commitment. You can't change your plan every time you have a new mandate, political mandates. It's very key to have this long-term vision. And for that, you need the citizens' engagement also. They are probably the one that could also contribute to having continuity in the political strategic vision. There is also definitely a need for holistic approach and some real priorities that correspond to the local context, to the cultural and historical heritage. That is something extremely important to keep. This is the identity of the city. And of course, we need to have a culture of results and communication because it will engage with a lot of funding. There will be a need for a lot of patience among all different citizens and parties and stakeholders. So it's very, very important to communicate. It contributes to maintaining the momentum and support. So in that sense, standardization could definitely be of interest and support, especially for the replication and scaling up about district level success stories, but also for business model and trust created between the different stakeholders, especially alignment with investment. Most of the time, people are not convinced that the project is at a reasonable risk level just before they are not speaking the same language. So alignment is very key. There is also a need to disseminate, to promote sustainable development among the different cities, and best practice success stories benchmarking is very, very important in that sense. So we can sum up these type of approaches in several sequences. First, a need for a vision, a long-term commitment with objective, strategic and objective, then to, let's say, apply this type of strategy or decline these strategies in roadmaps with targets. And of course, we need to implement these measures with a culture of results, which means measuring, monitoring, evaluating against the planned targets and correcting, improving if we are not in the right directions. And of course, communicating and reporting. These first sequences need a very strong political commitment, as I said before, while the next one needs a real culture of results, a real holistic cross-sectoral approach. And for all of these different sequences, KPIs, expectable targets, and benchmarking will play a key role in bringing some kind of confidence. So based on this principle, that's exactly what, let's say, leads the work of the ISO Technical Committee on Smart and Sustainable Cities Development with this type of sequences: vision, strategy, roadmap, implementation, permanent improvement. For each of these different sequences, we have some dedicated standards. And especially management system standards that will cover all the different sequences and help a city to go through this very long journey. I don't want to go in details through all of these different sequences as well as the related standards, but you can understand that terms and definitions, speaking the same language, is something very important. Same about KPIs, type of indicators of performance that should be common to all in order, again, to compare carrots with carrots also. And of course, for each of these sequences, we find a set of dedicated standards. So that's, as I said, what is driven the standardization activities at ISO level, but more specifically regarding the different KPIs and standards related to KPIs, we have three major standards about indicators for sustainable cities, another one for the smartness part of the cities, but also the resilient part. In total, it's more than 500 indicators. So you can ask yourself if this is really relevant. The idea is not to implement all the KPIs. The idea is to select one that will help the city to progress, help the city to report with regard to the priorities they set in place. But having such a long list means we have an agreement about the definitions of the KPIs, and so when a city will use such one of those, we know for sure that what will be in the way they will consider the boundary of the indicators are common. And that's something very important if you want then to compare, to benchmark, to feed the benchmark with success stories and indicators that have the same meanings among the different communities. So just to give you a very quick idea, ISO has this ISO technical committee gather almost 60 members from all around the world. Australia just joined very recently, so now we have all continents, and it's very, very proactive. And I have the great honor to chair this technical committee too. This is at the international level. In fact, at European level, we decided to have some joint approach, a joint platform between people from the electrotechnical sector, CENELEC, people from the ITU or ICT sector, ETSI, and the rest of the activities of standardization being CEN. The reason is to try to have a complete flow and consistent flow of standards that could be easier to understand by the cities themselves. Today, there are so many different initiatives, even among standardization bodies, that sometimes it's very difficult for a city to know exactly which one to follow. So this sector forum has been created a few years ago. It's not the place where we are writing standards. This is the strategy and advisory body to CENELEC and ETSI technical boards. We have several meetings or plenary session per year, an annual seminar, I will come back, and we have the permanent representation of the European Innovative Partnership for Smart Cities and Communities and European Commission initiatives, as well as a participation of the European Commission in order to see and to help aligning the developments of standards with the evolution of the legislation context, of course. It's a platform of exchange. We try to collect information from cities, with cities, and all the different related stakeholders, including cities and the NGOs. And we bring support and guidance for relevant development for further standards, but also we coordinate and advise on the activities relevant for cities among the different communities. We consider if further standardization work is needed, or if we prefer to have something immediately placed at the global level, especially within ISO, IEC, and ITUT. One of our key role also is to try to check among the European community if some global standards, like ISO, IEC, ITU, could be relevant for adoption at European level, and to discuss how to adopt these different standards. Do we have to correct a little bit? Do we have to amend the existing standards to fit perfectly with our European context? We have an annual event, as I said, where we collect expression of needs from cities, and we try to develop, to launch some working group dedicated to strategic new issues we identified through this collection of expression of needs from cities. And we are also acting as a reference standardization board in that field in Europe among the different communities. However, as I said, what is very key is to understand what is needed from the cities, what they should, how we could also improve our standardization development in order to meet their expectations. We have, as Martin has said before the coffee break, we need to step back. We need to have the humility to say, okay, we thought it was the right way, but finally it's not, because it does not correspond to what a city needs, to what the customer needs, in fact. So that's something we are doing. So this platform of exchange will collect these needs. We'll also collect the feedbacks from the implementation of our tools. And what is very important is to start having this common element of language. It's also a need to share experience between the cities and to start building a benchmark using these standardized KPIs. But that's where we also need statisticians in our standardization development, because we need some official structures, body that can or ensure the validity of our analysis, but also the interpretation. And again, people trust in the statistical authorities. So this is something that is today missing in our work and different groups. Same for moving from common indicators to impact, the measures that could be impacted by the implementation of a few of these KPIs and the value we will collect. Again, a strong need of statisticians with us in partnership, in collaboration for the development. About training cities authorities, there is a need also to use the best practice to educate, raise awareness among the different cities, authorities, but also the different related stakeholders. It's not only a question of benchmarking, but it's also, before all, I guess, a question of bench learning. And that's extremely important. We need to elaborate this way to bring this, let's say, motion in the learning phase. And again, we need the statistician in that sense. We also need to align with statisticians in order to be able to deliver the right type of information that could also be useful for the official statistics you are responsible for. So having said that, we need to engage with all stakeholders. There is a need to define targets from, most of the time, best practice and existing experience and benchmarking, again, with the needs for statisticians. There is, in our approach, a permanent improvement loop. We need always to check if we are close to the expected targets. And for doing so, there is a need to track all the different value, all the different progress against the pre-set targets and objectives we defined during the elaboration of our roadmaps. And as I said, I wrote on that slide, the question is, did we deliver? It's extremely important to be able to report in that sense. So no improvement without measurement needs monitoring. Monitoring will clarify a lot of things, will help in following progress, will help in bringing confidence among all different stakeholders and especially citizens. But there is a need to translate these objectives in terms of performance indicators, what we call the KPIs. And the importance of the KPIs lies in the fact that they should be comparable for monitoring. If we have no comparable KPIs, it will be absolutely impossible to use the best practice or the results of any experiments for promoting a replication of scaling up among other cities or among the cities itself. So standards is extremely key for the definition of KPIs, for having some standardized collection process, to also have decide or define the role of the monitoring as an improvement tool, but also for feeding the benchmark, and that will help in the decision-making phase, also for aligning, bridging between political decision and investment. But again, as I said before, there is a strong need for statistical authorities, for proper use of data, then benchmark. And we know that citizens need to trust in all what we will propose, so citizen acceptance is essential, and people trust in standards, but also in statistical authorities. And that's why I think aligning, strengthening the relation between us will be extremely important. Benchmarking, I already said, it's exactly the same, common definition, common performance indicators, and a strong need of statisticians in our work. Having said that, just to give you an idea about why it's so important in Europe to have this type of common understanding, common work, we have one network of 34 countries among CEN and CENELEC. It covers the member states of the European Union, plus EFTA countries, plus the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia and Turkey. When a standards is published as a European standards, all the different existing national, potentially conflicting standards have to be withdrawn and replaced by the European one, which means that every country will be aligned first with the same, in Europe, the same, let's say, legislative context, directive and European regulation, but also with the same set of standards, which is extremely powerful for aligning and boosting a common market for 600 million inhabitants. But one of our goals, as we are very close to ISO and IEC, is, of course, to have identical European and international standards. And that's what we're trying to do through our different activities. Technical committee, again, with a lot of different members, not only voting members, but also observatory, with probably a place for statistician official authorities like Eurostat to play a role. That's something we will probably discuss in the future. Why, in conclusion, why is a European standard so valuable? First of all, it corresponds to what the different stakeholders expected. It's shaped by those who contribute. It is also open and a transparent process. It's market-driven. It represents all the interested parties involved, engaged in the standards, but it's open to everyone. It's reached through consensus, which means that all different parties will agree all together, consensual manner. There is a national commitment, as I said before, with technical coherence and alignment throughout Europe. So globally, standardization in particular with regard to what we are discussing today, help is essential for having common definitions, speaking the same language, common performance indicators, common procedure methodology for collecting these KPIs, and benchmarking of best practice and success stories that is of interest and useful for, let's say, replication, scaling up, and motivating others to enter in these sustainable development approaches. And there is a real complementary need of statisticians from statistic authorities for, as I said, the proper use of this data for contributing to the public acceptance, citizen acceptance, trust and confidence, ranking performances, reporting on or feeding local, national, international commitments targets, but also for relevant and consistent statistics. Thank you very much. I really hope to strengthen our relations.